before there was time, before there was space, before even the whisper of light dared to crack the infinite. Silence. There was something. Or perhaps not something, but someone. A presence unbound by dimensions, undefined by limits, unshaped by matter or memory. We ask, who was God before creation? But even this question is drenched in the language of linear thinking. It assumes a before, a ticking clock, a background stage against which a divine being stood and waited. But what if there was no waiting? No stage, no before at all? God, in the truest and rawest sense, did not emerge from a place. He is the place from which all things emerge. In the absence of creation, God was not idle. He was complete, wholly sufficient, fully actualized, the totality of being and beyond being. The very concept of waiting implies lack. But in God there was no lack, no need, no urgency. Just pure, unshaken existence that existed not in time, but in eternity. Not on a line, but as the canvas upon which the idea of lines would later be drawn. The question is not just theological, it is philosophical, existential, and deeply human. We want to understand origins because we are creatures of beginnings and endings, but God is not. God is the beginningless origin, the uncaused cause, the unmoved mover. He is not a being among beings, but being itself, not bound by the story of creation, but the author of the very idea of story. Imagine a consciousness so vast, so luminous, so utterly unbounded that it does not dwell in time. It defines it. It does not move through space. It composes it. It does not react. It initiates. If we strip away every atom, every law of physics, every concept of dimension, we arrive not at nothing, but at God. Not at absence, but at a singular, eternal presence, one that is infinite in wisdom, power, and presence. Before there was let there be light, there was light already, in him. Not the photons or wavelengths we understand, but the essence of all understanding. Before creation began, creativity existed. Before love could manifest, love was. Before life could bloom, life is. God was not born. He was not formed. He was not named by another. He simply is. That terrifying, beautiful, all-encompassing is. Not he was, not he will be, but I am, the sacred name whispered to Moses. A declaration not of time but of transcendence. To ask who God was before creation is to gaze into the heart of mystery itself. Yet even mystery bends before him, because he is not merely a puzzle to be solved, but the very source of all things that can be known. It is tempting to think of God as an old man in the sky, wise and watchful, floating in empty space, waiting to begin. But this is not the God we speak of. This God does not wait, does not age, does not dwell in any sky because he authored the sky. He does not live in the universe, he breathes it into being. And in that eternal spaceless state, God was not alone, because loneliness implies a lack of company. But he had no lack. He was perfect community within himself, Father, Son, Spirit, the eternal triune communion of love and purpose, even before time dared to begin. What was God doing before creation? Perhaps that's the wrong question. Perhaps the better question is, what does it mean for God to exist without creation? The answer does not lie in what he did, but in who he is. God is the wellspring of being, the infinite source of truth, beauty, meaning, and will. Before he created the cosmos, he was complete perfection, lacking nothing, yet bursting with the overflowing desire to give, to create, to share his glory, not out of need, but out of love. Creation was not the beginning of God's story, it was the beginning of ours. It was the moment when he chose to express his infinite nature in finite forms, when he carved time from the block of eternity and painted the universe with the colors of his own being. But he was never changed by this act. The Creator is never diminished by his creation. He remains unchanging, eternal, and sovereign, even as he wraps himself in the laws of matter and writes himself into the chapters of our unfolding history. So when we ask, who was God before creation? We are really reaching into the fog of our own limitations. It's a question that reveals more about our nature than his. We long to fit the infinite into the box of the comprehensible. But God resists being contained, not because he is distant, but because he is too close, too pure, too overwhelming in essence for our minds to grasp fully. He is not a part of the universe's timeline. He is the clockmaker who does not wear a watch. Yet in all this transcendence, God is not removed, he is near. The same God who breathed galaxies into motion is the God who whispers to hearts, who bends down to listen, who paints sunsets not out of necessity but generosity. The origin of God is not an origin at all, but a mystery that draws us upward and inward, toward awe, toward reverence, toward surrender. He was not waiting for us. He was inviting us, all along, into the story that begins not with a bang, but with a word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. When the universe was but a thought, God was already thought itself. When energy had not yet stirred, he was already power. When beauty had not bloomed, he was already the source of all wonder. His existence before creation is not a riddle to unravel, but a glory to behold. He did not begin when time began. He is the reason time exists at all. And so we cannot ask, who was God before creation? In the way we ask, who were we before we were born? Because God was not born. He simply is. And in that we find peace. We find foundation. We find something, someone, who does not shift with the tides of culture, who does not flicker with the lights of science, who does not crumble under the weight of reason, but instead holds all reason in his hand. We find the one who was never made, never broken, never lacking, and never late. The one whose existence is not provable like a formula, but undeniable like a sunrise. Who was God before creation? The question echoes into eternity, and the answer returns not in a sentence, but in a presence that fills the silence with meaning. And if that presence speaks, what does it say? Not in thunder, not always in scripture, not in the confines of creeds, but in existence itself. In every atom that obeys a law, every tree that stretches toward light, every heart that longs for truth, we hear the echo of the eternal. Before there was anything, there was already everything in him. No blueprint, yet all design. No materials, yet all potential. No audience, yet all intent. Not passive, not watching, but radiating a fullness so infinite that the act of creation became inevitable, not as a requirement, but as a gift. This God, unmade and unmeasurable, needed nothing outside himself to be complete. That is what separates him from everything else. Everything else waits to be made, to be formed, to be explained. But not God. He is not an equation that needs variables to function. He is the logic behind logic, the love behind love, the order behind chaos, and the silence behind every question we dare to ask about beginnings. He was not a flame waiting to be lit. He was the fire from which all other fires drew their spark. To believe in such a God is to step outside the comfort of definitions. It is to confess that the deepest truths cannot be held in human hands or confined in syllables. Who was God before creation? He was not a who in the way we imagine persons. He is the origin of personhood itself, not personality, not mood, not character as we define it, but the infinite well of consciousness from which self-awareness itself finds its source, the first I that ever was, the original observer, the voice before all voices, the mind before minds, and in that mind, every possibility danced before time began, not as options to be chosen, but as certainties already known. He saw the rise and fall of galaxies as clearly as we see the hands in front of our face. He knew every heartbeat, every betrayal, every moment of joy and grief before the clock of the cosmos began ticking. He held all potential outcomes not as burdens, but as the symphony of his will. There was no surprise waiting for him in creation. Only expression, only love spilling outward into time. This is the weight of what we speak when we mention God, not a figure in mythology, not a character in folklore, not a symbol for morality, but the eternal self-existing one, whose being gives meaning to every other being. Before the stars, before the darkness, before the concept of before, he was. And he remains untouched by entropy, unshaken by doubt, undiminished by disbelief. He is not made more real by our faith in him, he simply is. And in that isness he invites us, not to understand fully, but to surrender humbly. We often wrestle with the silence of God, with the mystery, with the sense that he hides behind the veil of reality. But perhaps the truth is not that he is distant. Perhaps he is so close, so deeply interwoven into the fabric of existence, that we overlook him precisely because he is everywhere. Before creation, he was the silence. After creation, he is still the silence. But now that silence hums with the frequencies of purpose. It vibrates with intention. It echoes with the voice that once said, "Let there be." And yet, even the word "let" is an accommodation to our language. God does not allow creation like a parent letting a child go. He commands, he breathes, he wills, and what he wills becomes. This is power beyond force, authority beyond compulsion. It is the kind of power that creates not to dominate but to reveal, to express, to share joy and wonder with creatures who can choose to love him in return. And that love, freely given, is the greatest echo of his own nature. So we return again to the question, who was God before creation? The same as he is now, immutable, eternal, overflowing with light that has no shadow, radiant with goodness that needs no comparison. His identity is not formed by action, but revealed through it. The act of creating did not make God more. It made us able to glimpse him. Creation is not the start of God's story. It is the unveiling of his glory. And we are not the center of that glory, but its recipients, its audience, its echo. To look backward and ask about God's beginning is like asking where the horizon ends. We reach for it, we chase it, but it always moves further out. Not because it's deceptive, but because we are limited. Our minds were born inside time, shaped by cause and effect. But the Creator lives outside the loop. He is not the result of a cause. He is the cause of causality, the reason why reasons exist. And perhaps the real wonder is not that God existed before creation, but that he chose to create it all. That he chose to make space for things that were not him, and yet could reflect him. That he spoke reality into being not with a shout, but with a whisper of pure love. The heavens declare his glory not just because they are vast, but because they are intentional, designed, not necessary but wanted. You are not a mistake. The stars were not accidents. The laws of physics are not coincidences. They are brushstrokes of a mind that existed before time, painting beauty into a canvas that did not yet exist. And even now we are part of that painting, strokes of light and shadow, of joy and pain, each bearing the fingerprint of the eternal. Each life a thread woven into the grand story, authored by a God who never began and will never end. So do not fear the question. Do not silence the wondering. Let it lead you not to confusion, but to reverence. Let the question of God's origin become the doorway to awe. For in asking who God was before creation, we are invited to step out of ourselves and gaze into the eternal. We are invited to know, not everything, but enough. Enough to stand in the presence of mystery, enough to believe, enough to worship.